So, good morning. Welcome. I'm Ben Mashter, Access to Funding and Finance Manager, Innovate UK EDGE. Welcome to our step-by-step walkthrough of, well, titled Winning Innovate UK's Creative Industries Fund. A recording of this is being made, as you're probably aware, and so that'll be available after the webinar shortly. Just so you know, Innovate UK is the UK Research and Innovation Agency. It is to invest with this grant opportunity 2.5 million in innovation projects. The funding is coming from a pot of 750 million COVID support fund that Innovate UK secured to support businesses bounce back from the pandemic. The aim of this competition, like the Creative Industry Fund, is to provide a targeted support for businesses to grow who are ambitious in the creative sector, help them reach their potential. Subject to eligibility criteria, you may be able to access Innovate UK EDGE's comprehensive funding business support tailored to your business needs, but I'll give you more details about that at the end. Quick piece of housekeeping. There's going to be a Q&A at the end of this, so if you've got a question, please put it in that. If you need any help, raise your hand, and there's a chat there if you want to discuss anything between yourselves. We have someone watching over all of these, just to keep an eye on it in case you need any support, or if you've got anything urgent, we can hopefully address that as we run. Quick disclaimer as well, just going to remind you that Innovate UK EDGE is not financial advisors. We're not providing information to you we're not recommending any particular course of action. This is just a bit of a disclaimer so we don't get ourselves in any trouble. And I think now we're ready to hand over to Adele. As you can see there's Adele. She's going to be talking through the Creative Industry Fund. Today, our presentation should help you understand how best to win the funding, how answer any questions you might have. The fund is all about exploring new revenue streams, supporting you to explore new revenue streams by creating new products, services, or IP, responding to changing market conditions in response to COVID and other things. So if everyone's ready, I'm going to now hand over to Adele. Adele.
Great, thank you, Ben. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. So, title: Winning Innovate UK's Creative Industries Fund. So, we'll just wait for that slide to disappear. Thank you. So, firstly, why are you here today? So, chances are, if you're attending the webinar today, you're either in the process of filling out the application for the Creative Industries Fund, which of course closes next week. In which case you might look something like this, because you realise there's now, well, a week to go before the deadline. Or alternatively, you've not started filling the application in yet, and you're just thinking about it. So you might look something like this. Now, if you're in the latter category, I urge you to really start thinking about preparing your application a bit quicker, as obviously next week is the close of play. If you're in the former, great. You can absolutely get something out of the session in relation to completing your application form, and either category you're in, you'll get something out of today. Unfortunately, though, by attending the webinar, we can't promise you'll be guaranteed to win funding, but we can, of course, help you to give it your very, very best shot. So, going on to the project. Now, if you've read the project brief online, you'll already know that your project must have total eligible costs up to £25,000. Must end by the 31st of March 2022, last between 3 and 6 months. Now, of those £25,000, you can claim up to 100% of eligible project costs, and we're anticipating most applications to be around the £25,000 mark. It's really important to say here, you can't apply if you've previously received funding from Innovate UK. So, the project must offer a clearly innovative and ambitious idea, really important, mustn't be business as usual. So must be new to your business with a demonstrable impact to your growth plan. You must be creating a new revenue stream, for example, new products, new services, IP. and responding to changing market conditions, such as new modes of audience consumption or the adoption of new technologies within the sector. Important to be market ready within 12 months of receiving support, being able to start rapidly. And of course, because the grant is all taxpayers' money, you must be really representing value for money with your project. Now, as just alluded to, the time is ticking, the fund is open, 16th of June closes. You'll find out if you've been successful the 27th of August. So one thing to be aware of is to be like Bob. He didn't wait until 10:49 to submit his application. Get it in before the deadline on the 16th of June. We had a recent deadline where the Innovate system unfortunately was so swamped it's crashed. So don't submit on the day. Be like Bob, submit in advance. So the application then, the bit you're all here for. The application is split into 3 sections, and I promise this won't be death by PowerPoint. I will be going into each section specifically, although not specifically the finances. So application is split into 3 sections: project details, application questions, and finances. The main focus today is going to be on the project details and application questions. You're going to need to submit the finances in line with the application requirements. So this section provides background for the assessors and is not scored, the project details. The application team. Decide which organisations are going to work with you on the project and invite people from those organisations to help you complete the application. Obviously, bearing in mind now, time is of the essence. Application details. This is where you, the lead applicant, must complete this section. You give the project start, date, title, duration. Equality, diversity and inclusion, EDI, really important. Innovate UK collects and report on equality, diversity and inclusion. This is really used to address underrepresentation in business innovation and really ensures EDI across all of our different activities. You must complete this EDI survey and type EDI survey completed within your answer. The survey will ask you questions on your gender, age, ethnicity, disability status. You can say prefer not to say if you don't feel comfortable sharing this information, but it's really helpful to share this to really ensure that we're being as inclusive as possible. Project summary. Now I've highlighted project summary and scope because even though these elements aren't scored, they're both really important. In the project summary, describe your project briefly and be clear about what makes it innovative. Innovate UK, the clue is in the title, are all about kind of innovation. So use, and we'll also use this section to assign experts to assess your application. Your answer in this section can be 400 words long. And while it isn't scored, it's really, really important to set the scene for assessors. Basically see this question as where the exam begins. Don't underestimate its importance just because it's not scored. It's the first thing the assessor is going to read. And if it's the first thing they're going to read, it's essential to make a really good first impression. Public description up to 100 words. Really just describe your project in detail in a way you'd be happy to see published. Don't include any commercially sensitive information. If you're awarded the project funding, Innovate UK will publish this description. And that could actually happen before you start your project. So you've got 100 words. Normally it's just an abridged version of the project description, but remember to avoid or alternatively explain any terminology that regular Joe blogs wouldn't understand. Scope up to 400 words. This is really your opportunity to describe how your project fits within the scope of the competition. Again, really important section, and it's a gateway question to the rest of the application. Basically, there's no point trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. If your application isn't in scope, it will be rejected at the first hurdle. Okay, application questions, number 2. So this is essentially where the scoring of the application really begins. The assessors will score your answers. Questions number 3 to 6 and questions number 1 and 2 aren't scored. but do remember they're really important, even though they're not scored. When you're putting together your answers, don't include any website addresses in your answers. The assessor shouldn't and won't be looking at external links when they're assessing your application. So it's not appropriate or relevant to include the external links. Top tips. Now, I can't emphasize this enough. Answer the questions. So list the application questions within your answer. List the questions within that question, and then answer those questions. It seems like it's a really simple piece of advice, but it's really easy when you're creating an application to go off on a tangent and talk about what you want to talk about. But actually, for these applications, it's so important to address what the assessor is marking on, not what you want the assessor to mark on. So again, this is Bob. Bob reads the questions. He likes eating waffles, but he didn't waffle outside the requirements of the question. He answered the question. Be like Bob. Okay, moving on. Question 3, the idea, scored out of 20. Answer can be up to 400 words long. Always try and maximize your word count. If you've got 400 words, use 400 words, because you've got to get 20 scoring marks within those 400 words. It's no point. There's no point at all using 200 words, because you're not going to be addressing in the depth required. Yeah, lots to pack in within that question. So going into more detail then, these are the questions within each question. So the specific need you propose to address, and who would benefit from it in the immediate and longer term. So with this, what is the market need for your product? Who wants to buy it? Is there a demand for it? Is it going to make you any money? Would someone be willing to pay for your product or service which you're proposing? How many people are actually going to benefit from it? Moving on then, the specific innovation you propose to develop, and how this is different and better than alternative solutions. So think about who or what are your competitors? What do they have that you don't? Give the project some context for your assessor, and talk about how you're going to develop that. Okay. Any previous technical and business planning work that you may have conducted in relation to the proposed project and your freedom to operate. So there are really 2 parts to this question. Part 1 is the technical and business planning, and part 2 is the freedom to operate. So looking at part 1, what's gone into the idea so far? What have you done to validate it already? Is it in your business plan? And is there an appropriate value proposition? Part 2, does the competitor have any patents that are going to prevent you from doing what you want to do and launching a successful project? You know, maybe you've conducted a search on eSpace or similar, and stating that is better than nothing. But if you're working in a sector with established competitors, it may be worth, if feasible, given time constraints, the investment to obtain a professional opinion stating this. But you know, that's if possible. The size of the opportunity and your route to market, such as partnerships and business models. It's super important to be able to quantify the target market. Now remember that Innovate UK is primarily interested in the UK market. So if you're going to talk about internationalization and overseas markets, remember to list them both separately. Now, whilst the size of the market is really, really important, please avoid the temptation of citing a really big number. You know, if there are 1 million people, you know, break that down into subsections so you can really identify your proposed project market. And again, remember, assessors can't look up preferences. So make sure the sources of your numbers are described in sufficient detail. Talk about things like how you're planning to access the market. What routes to market do you already have established? How are you going to get your products and services onto the market? Maybe you're already working in partnership with other businesses or organizations who can help you get into the market. What are your business models for doing so? Are you B2B, B2C, or something else? Really consider the market as a whole and showcase that to the assessor. Okay, impact and added value. So this is scored out of 35, again, up to 400 words. What will be the impacts of receiving the grant to your business? How will the UK benefit? And why do you need public funding to help you succeed? When you're writing this answer, consider the following: the outputs of the project in terms of specific deliverables and where you've moved your business from and to. So specific deliverables of any outputs you're expecting from this project and how you're going to get your business to the next stage in the business journey. Expected impacts on society, the economy, and the environment. And what potential negative impacts have you considered, if any? Address each point of this part of the question in turn. Impacts on society, the economy, the environment. Don't ignore the potential negative impacts of your project. You know, what goes up must come down. The positive has a negative. You know, be sure to address any negative points you can think of. And why public funding is necessary and value for money. For example, is there a lack of private investment or a market failure? It's really important here to evidence that you've tried to address, try to fund the project with alternative sources of funding. And for whatever reason, that might not be possible. Because this is taxpayers' money in a pilot project, the assessor needs to really see the value in what you're proposing. Because ideally, we want to have this as a regular grant. So, you know, being able to have projects that are really good value for money, you know, is fantastic. Ideally, tie this question back to question 3 with a problem that you want to solve and how many people will benefit. So you're kind of linking all the questions together. The assessor really needs to see that there's a commercial value to your proposal, because at the end of the day, they want to get the best value for money from every taxpayer pound that they put in. Okay, question 5, business planning and resources. Again, scored out of 30, well, not again, but scored out of 35. Your answer can be up to 400 words long. Who is in the team and what is the capability to deliver a solution? Including in your answer a description of what combination of resources you can access, describing the main people involved, including their relevant track records and any other critical internal and external resources, including subcontractors. Remember here that resources aren't just people. Resources are skills, equipment, and knowledge. Think about all the skills of the people on the project and any skills that might be lacking in order to, you know, what do you need to bring in order for your project to be successful? The team should be really well-rounded. Don't just put together a team for the grant application. That will be really obvious and will ring alarm bells as to whether or not the team can work together well. And also, please don't just include a page of CVs. Nobody likes that. Your capability to deliver in the required time frame, given your existing business activities or constraints. This is really just addressing your in-house capacity. If you don't have a team, if it is just you or you and one other person, how are you actually going to get the project completed? The assessor really needs to see that awarding you a grant is going to lead to a successful project, which in turn is going to lead to a good news story. Everybody wins. How will you deliver outcomes and impact beyond the life of the project? What's going to happen when the project's over? What are the future opportunities? And how will you maintain the momentum of delivering outcomes and impact in the future? Really think about taking it beyond the project. Okay. Work plan and costs. Now, this question is only scored out of 10, but that doesn't mean that it's just a quick question. You know, every points win prizes and every point counts. So again, your answer can be up to 400 words long. What will you do with the grant funding? How will you manage the project effectively and all risks appropriately? So what will the funding be spent on? These are the questions that were within this question. What will the funding be spent on? Explaining the project work plan, including technical approaches, main work packages, specific milestones, and project management. So for this point, the project work plan should be clear, really highlighting how you're going to get the project from point A to point B and the steps that you're going to take to get there. So within this, you might break down your project into manageable chunks or work packages. Against these work packages, be sure to add specific milestones and how you're going to manage each stage of the project. So moving on, the main risks. Risks are looking at the main risks: COVID-19 pandemic, working constraints, interdependencies, impact and mitigation strategy. You should pay particular attention to how you're going to mitigate project delivery risks with your immediate and extended teams, for example, supply chain end users and so on. Do you have the right infrastructure in place? So here, the assessor wants to see that your project has the best chance of success, and that means addressing the risks. It's essential there are a good range of risks. So, for example, might be competitors launching a similar product or service. You could consider environmental risks. You could consider commercial risks, technical risks, managerial risks. But what you must do is detail how you're going to mitigate against them and show that you have the right infrastructure in place in order to de-risk your project. The roles of individuals and organizations. So this is where you have others coming in to support the success of the project. What roles do they play? And how are you actually going to oversee what they're doing, again, for the success of the project? A breakdown of costs aligned with tasks. Where possible, describe how best value for money, again, has been decided. For example, a quotation comparison. So consider here what key tasks need to be undertaken to make the project a success and how this breaks down cost-wise. The value for money element of this question is critical. The assessor needs to see that taxpayers' money is being well used and that your project will lead to commercial success. And finally here, wider supports that you may need during or after the project that you don't currently have access to. For example, domestic and international partnerships, private finance, and export advice. Now, all of these things are acknowledging and addressing any gaps you have in personnel, resources, knowledge, and so on. And as part of the grant, you're going to be awarded time with an Innovate UK EDGE advisor, like Ben or I, or other members of our team, who have delivered a whole wide range of services from marketing support, export support, market research, funding and finance. This is really going to give the assessors an understanding of how you can be best supported by the project, both during it and after it. So if you've not already done so, there was a recent webinar by the KTM talking specifically about this fund. The links here, will be sure to share or make the slides available after the presentation. But I fully encourage you to watch this as it goes into a little bit more detail again, if you haven't already done so. Any questions?
So I think at this stage, I was just going to quickly jump in and just say a few words in addition to what Adele's gone through there. Great, thanks for that, by the way, Adele, I forgot to say. Yeah, and sort of really the key things here to take away if you're new to writing innovation grants, grant applications, things like that, is they're not looking for business as usual, as Adele said. They're actually looking for something quite risky. They want you to be pushing the boundaries as much as you can. You know, it's all about innovation. It's all about creating the next big thing, a new market opportunity, a new market even. So risk is good, but managing the risk in that final section, the final question, is important. So risky innovation, yes. Risky financials, not so good. But I just thought I'd go over those again, really. And in that final question as well, they want to know sort of what other, have you looked at other types of finance to support this? Why do you need a grant? Have you explored debt finance or commercial through banks and things like that, loans? Have you explored equity investments? Why isn't that right? Why can't you get that to support this? And sort of something like maybe like crowdfunding as well could be really applicable to your idea. So it's something to keep in mind when writing out the sort of reasons why you need the grant, why it's value for money. Another big thing there, which you'll have seen, is the split of the scoring across the 4 scored questions. 20 points for the idea, and then 35 each for the impact and the business plan elements. So they're looking for strong ideas, but that is only 20% of it. You need to back that up with, show them that you can really you've got a really good grip on how you're going to make money out of this, why it's a good commercial proposition, what the impact's going to be, why it's going to have long-ranging impacts. It could be societally, it could be commercially. It doesn't have to just you don't have to limit yourself to, I've got a really cool idea, I just need some money to get it over to the next stage. They really want to see that these ideas are going to have sort of as much impact as they can, wider than just the grant, going forward into the future, maybe timeline your impacts. And the business plan itself, as Adele said, it's 10. The work plan itself, it is the final question, it's 10 marks, 10% of the scores. Please don't, as Adele said, forget about it. This is going to be a super competitive call, and it's going to be won and lost over single or half percentage points. You don't want to miss out because you think, work plan, it's the last question, I've spent all my time doing this other one, it's only 10 marks, I'll just throw something together. Every mark counts. Bit more generally as well, and I say this to everyone who's looking at innovation grants, these assessors, they are super hardworking. They're trying to give you the money as much as possible, but you have to try and engage them. You have to give them the opportunity to give you those points. The assessment process is a scored process. The assessors, there'll be 5 of them for each application. They have to sit down and mark every application that comes across their desk against a certain criteria of how many points they can give them. If you are not engaging that assessor by sort of this very initial project summary, if they're not buying in straight away, you might fall into the sort of it's hard to sort of denigrate these people who work really hard, but they are working so hard that they've got maybe dozens of these assessments to do a day. So you need to stand out from the crowd. You need to grab their attention. Once you've got them engaged in your idea, you then need to allow them to give you those marks. So that is not missing any of those guidance marks off that Adele mentioned. They are there for a reason. They want you to address them, each one of them. So don't just skip over them. So they're talking, the one about negative impacts. So easy to just think, there's no negative impacts here. But if you go ahead and just write down, I've assessed the situation and I feel there is no negative impacts, that at least shows you've seen it and you've not forgotten it, and you're putting that forward. What I would say though is it might be good to actually come up with, if you can, really try and come up with a negative impact, and then go into details about why it's going to be mitigated by other aspects of the project or various things that you're going to propose. That shows that you're really thinking about every aspect that they're looking for you to look into and think about. So yeah, don't throw marks away, really don't. It's so frustrating when we see this, and Dale and I see this all the time, is people who they've got such a good idea, but they throw marks away through the fact that they're sort of distracted because they've got business as usual going on over here and someone's shouting at them to do something, but they've got this deadline coming, and it's really hard. And they're super hard to write these things well. It's not a job I would want to give anyone, but that is just how it is. You've got to spend as much time as you can on this, because it's not an easy. This isn't going to be easy to win. I see this being one of the most competitive application processes of the year. That's a good thing, though. I don't see that's a bad thing. another couple of quick bits and pieces, and I'll stop chatting in a minute and we can do some Q&A, but don't disqualify yourself. That's another thing that we see all the time, is people might put in costs that are outside of the 25,000, thinking, oh, it's fine, I'll just, they know I'm only going to claim the first 25,000 here. They don't want that. They want a project which is comes under that 25,000. That's what they're looking to fund. If you go outside of that and try and write it off somewhere else in the application, there's going to be a computer says no situation. As terrible as that is, the first sift of these applications happens within about 5 minutes of the deadline closing, and you might get an email back at 11 on the deadline day saying, sorry, but you're not going to be put forward for assessment, after you've worked on this application for weeks. And instantly you get this pushback because at some point you've clicked the wrong button on the application, or you've put in the wrong number in the wrong section. Your project length is too long, the costs are wrong. Please don't fall down that gap. Get second pair of eyes, third pair of eyes to look at it. A lot of the time, Adele and I and the rest of the team, we handhold people through this. We handhold people through the application itself, the actually getting the information onto the website, because if you, it's the smallest of hurdles, but it can still trip you up. A couple more things. Market knowledge, Adele mentioned it there, really important to show you that you know that. There's 35 marks for that question. Show that you know as much as you can. You want to convince the assessors that you really have a good grip on the fact where the money sits within the sector, or the clients, or the whatever you're talking about making the money from. Show them that you know how to get that money. There's a business model that works and you're going to replicate that, or your business model works elsewhere and you're going to bring that into this new sector market. The granular data on the market information, global. So Adele mentioned about UK specific market information is key. It's very true. But then taking that from global market sort of information down to target market, down to target addressable market. Talk about it in numbers and talk about it in people. And yeah, finally, it's just the assessors. It's understanding who's marking this, and how you're going to win it is to get the assessors on your side. So convince them you know what you're talking about. Convince them, show them you've got an exciting idea, and where you need to put in some evidence to back up your claims. If you go along just making claims throughout the world beating, next biggest thing, whatever, it might not, you might sort of start losing the confidence of the assessor. They might think you're not credible. So references and things like that can really help. Other things to back up your claims equally. So I mean that's what I was really wanting to say. I don't know if you've got anything else to add there, Adele, on top of my waffle, like Bob.
I think there's a couple of points that are in the chat. So James has said really important to provide detailed answers around, i.e. around risk mitigation and resources. Absolutely, super important. I don't know. So we've got another couple of questions here. One from Andrew. Any advice regarding innovating a creative service versus a tech product?
So initially, when I see that, my thoughts go to, it's harder often to sort of quantify a creative service over a tech product. So talking about the market information, you know, if you're making widgets and the widget is worth X, and you know that the widgets in this market are worth X, and you're going to make a widget that's cheaper or better, added value there is it's much more easy to discuss. With a creative service, I think it's probably going to be harder to do that, to show that there's a strong commercial proposition here and a strong innovation. How do you do that? I'm not really sure.
there's a further question from Dan. Word limits tight with many sub-questions per section. Text only or visuals allowed, e.g. for a work plan? If so, how to provide? Hyperlink or embed? Question mark.
Okay, I'm happy to answer that. Words only. No, I mean, we mentioned before about URLs. They're not allowed to click through them. Images, visuals, there's nowhere in this application to put those in. Typically, you get the opportunity to put in appendices, so a PDF type thing. So it can be anything. It can be a picture of your dog, but it could also be work plans and sort of Gantt charts. Here, they're looking for it just to be explained in a narrative form. So it's going to be really difficult to do that. As you say, it's about concise language, clear, concise language. Try and get your point across in as little words as you can. I don't really know. So, I mean, work plans, you could, I mean, there's bullet points and things like that are sometimes a good idea, sometimes a good way to get information across when it's almost like a list. But you don't want to have too many things like bullet points in there. Because it takes away from that narrative, that engagement aspect of explaining things well to the assessor and convincing them well. List of bullet points doesn't really do that.
Yeah. I think for the work packages, that's slightly easier with a bullet point, because you can have section 1, work package 1, work package 2, and so on. Marcus makes an important point in the chat as well. My advice to these creatives would be to plan your application the same way that you would produce a script or storyboard. Grab attention, explain the context, tell the story well. Absolutely. If you can tell if you can present your application in the same way that you would as a narrative script, you know, beginning, middle, and end, Everest, Atlantis, all that sort of stuff. It's, you know, that's really helpful to create the scene of what you want to do in the mind of the assessor.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably something that maybe the applicants to this particular fund will have a much better feeling than something like myself. I've got a tech background, so I'd be really interested to see ideas put forward in a different way. I've just seen something else coming from Zhao. There is going to be a recording, I believe, sent out. I don't know if Marcus can confirm that in the chat, but this is recorded. I expect it to be sent out along with a copy of the slide deck to everyone. We typically put all of our webinars onto our YouTube page, I think, don't we? There we go. Marcus said yes. Good to see. Do we have any more questions? Speak now. No?
Don't think so.
Okay. Well, I think then it just comes to say thank you to Adele. Thank you for that. It was brilliant. As I mentioned in the welcome, you will have the opportunity to access comprehensive business support tailored to your business needs. So there's a QR code in the bottom corner there. Please use that to contact us or get in touch using the phone or the email you can see there.